Hello, welcome back to Brickwall Pictures. Today I am doing a Martin Scorsese tier list. I'm a huge fan of Mr. Martin Scorsese. I think he is one of the finest filmmakers to ever live, and he's still making incredible pieces of work. I have done a bunch of other tier lists on this channel, so make sure you check them out if you are fans of the people involved. I got tier list for Jackie Chan, Tony Jaa, Iko Uwais, Jet Li, Donnie Yen, Joon-ho Bong, Park Chan-wook, and the Coen brothers. I think that's all of them. And now Martin Scorsese. So check out all my tier lists, and we got a lot of films to go through. We got 24 Martin Scorsese movies to go through, so let's just get started. These are in a randomized order here, and we're starting off with Mean Streets. Now, Mean Streets wasn't Scorsese's first movie, but it was the first, Scorsese movie, if you catch my drift, if that makes any sense whatsoever. It was the first Scorsese film where his directorial style felt fully formed, and it was like, this is his uninhibited voice as a filmmaker, pulling from his own life experiences and creating art in a way that only he could. Mean Streets is a great gangster film. It has great characters and great performances. You have what is really Robert De Niro's big breakout role as Johnny Boy, but the actual star of this one is Harvey Keitel. Great gangster film. It gets the A tier. Next up, we have The Wolf of Wall Street, one of his more recent-ish kind of movies. The Wolf of Wall Street is not a gangster film, but it has the feeling and the pacing and the style of his big gangster films like Goodfellas. It's been called an epic of excess, and I think that is kind of like the best way to put it. The drama is great, the performances are great, but more than anything else, it's just a fun time. At over 3 hours long, it breezes right by. Long Scorsese movies don't really feel long. I mean, maybe they do to some people, but I would be happy to just let them go on ad infinitum. The Wolf of Wall Street, I think it's one of his best. It's so much fun, and I'm going to put it in the S tier. Next up, we have Boardwalk Empire. Now, Boardwalk Empire is not a film, but rather a TV series. Scorsese was an executive producer on the show. He was involved in creating it and getting it started and all that, and he also directed the pilot episode. So he is not responsible for the entire show, but he did direct the pilot, and he did have a hand in creating the style of the show, of course. Boardwalk Empire, overall, I think is a great show. The best season is season 3, the one where Bobby Cannavale plays the main antagonist. Gyp Rosetti, such a good character. But the whole show is really good. I would recommend the whole thing. The pilot basically plays out like a slightly shorter Scorsese gangster movie set in the Prohibition era. It's like A or B, the overall show. I think I'll put it in A tier. It's a really good show. I've seen it twice, actually, the whole thing. Very good. Next up is Taxi Driver. Taxi Driver is endlessly iconic. It's a masterpiece. This was his first time collaborating with Paul Schrader. It was actually one of Paul Schrader's first screenplays. I think it was his third screenplay, maybe his second. But the two of them are a total dream team. Paul Schrader writing and Scorsese directing is such a powerhouse duo. You have one of Robert De Niro's all-time great performances. Everything about Taxi Driver is perfect. It gets the S tier, of course. There should be no doubt about that. Next up is Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore. It doesn't feel as much like a Scorsese picture as a lot of his films do. It doesn't feel very personal. It's not necessarily like an on-brand Scorsese type story being told, but he directs it very well. And I would say the biggest reason to watch it is for Ellen Burstyn's titular performance as Alice. The bond between her and her son is believable and very well formed. Harvey Keitel's got a great supporting role. Chris Christopherson's really good at his ending bit in the film. It's got a good script, but I wouldn't call it an excellent script. It's a good script. It feels a lot like the feminine counterpoint to 5 Easy Pieces from the same time. Instead of Jack Nicholson, you got Ellen Burstyn. Top-notch performance as well. It doesn't feel so much like a Scorsese movie, is the only thing. B tier. The Departed. Should The Departed be the film that Scorsese got his Oscar for? Probably not. It's not his best. It is damn good, though. If you don't know, The Departed is actually a remake of a Hong Kong action film, Infernal Affairs. Check that one out as well. Also worth watching. The Departed is great, though. All the performances are great. It's a good cast. It's the best Mark Wahlberg has ever been. He's an actor who is really hit or miss for me, depending on the project. Sometimes I enjoy him. Other times I really don't enjoy him whatsoever. He's great in The Departed. So is Leo Dio. So is Matt Damon. I would say especially Jack Nicholson. Excellent. The Departed, it's just a good gangster film. It's a really tight screenplay. The ending, I love the ending. The whole last act is just a really satisfying domino chain being tipped over that had been set up so expertly throughout the whole lead up to the movie. I would give The Departed an A. I think the first time I watched it, I would have put it in B, but after a couple of rewatches, it's A tier for me. Next up is Who's That Knocking at My Door, which was Scorsese's first feature film. He'd done short films and some documentary stuff before that. This was his first feature film. It was also the first performance from Harvey Keitel, who's great in the film and would be great in a number of other Martin Scorsese projects. Aside from a great Harvey Keitel performance and some really, really well-edited sequences, like really creatively edited sequences, it gets borderline experimental in a few areas. Aside from those aspects, Who's That Knocking at My Door is rather unremarkable. It's a student film, you know. It feels held back. The script is unsure of itself, and it's a little unclear what it's trying to say, and it's not saying it particularly well. There's a lot of meandering, there's a lot of killing time, and none of the other characters outside of Harvey Keitel are really interesting to any degree. It's not great. It's a good foundation, and I mean, it's impressive as hell for like a student film and for a first feature. It's impressive as hell. In Scorsese's canon, though, I would say if you're a diehard Scorsese fan, then yeah, check it out, see where the man originated. Otherwise, it's not really essential viewing. Who's It Knocking at My Door is kind of a D tier film. It's very sloppy in a lot of areas. The script especially is pretty weak. Next up is Shutter Island. Shutter Island is another one that doesn't really feel like a Scorsese movie, but I love it, man. Shutter Island I've watched many times. It's a great thriller. It's a great creepy thriller, you know. It's one of those films like Silence of the Lambs that kind of like straddles the line perfectly between psychological thriller and outright horror film. It's got a great script. It's got great visual flair. It has one of Leonardo DiCaprio's best performances, I think. Maybe not quite as good as like Wolf of Wall Street, but it's one of his best performances. He's really good at it. I love the editing of this one. There's all these great little subtle directorial details that you might not catch on your first watch, but you will in the second one. Like, there's little moments that I love where, like, someone in the insane asylum will, like, pick up a glass to drink, right? And you'll see them, like, pick up the glass off the table, right? But then they'll cut into the match shot. She's, like, miming, holding the glass. And you might not even catch it the first time through because it's, like, subtle. She's doing the motion. You hear, like, the sound, the glugs of her drinking, right? But there's no cup in her hand. But then when she puts it down, the cup is back in her hand. It's really cool. Little details like that just keep you on edge, keep you questioning what's real, what's actually happening.
Thank you, Marsha.
Ben Kingston's got a fun supporting role. Oh, Ted Levine shows up. I'm a huge Ted Levine fan. I don't think that guy gets anywhere near the credit he deserves, but he gets to shine in like really like one scene, but he fucking crushes it. It's probably like A or B tier, but in my heart, it's an S tier, man. I love Shutter Island. The objective quality, you put it in A tier, or do I go with this? Put it where I feel it is. I don't know. Tough decision. I'm gonna put it in A tier. I'm gonna try to be non-biased here because I'm sure I have a bit of a bias towards Shutter Island because it's so like my taste in particular. I'm going to try to strip away some of my personal bias and leave it in the A tier. Next up is The Big Shave. Now this is one of Scorsese's short films. It's not a feature. Definitely worth watching though. I put it in here because I really enjoy this one. You could call it like an artsy-fartsy, experimental, whatever, so if you don't like that kind of thing, then skip it. It's a message film, you know? It has one specific thing that it's trying to say, and I think it says it in a very creative and effective manner. You could watch The Big Shave and have no fucking clue what's happening. It's basically just a guy he's in the bathroom, he puts on shaving cream, he starts shaving, and then basically like once he's shaved all the shaving cream away, he keeps shaving and he starts shaving through his cheek and shaving through, and he eventually like slits his neck with a razor blade. And then the short ends, that's the whole thing. Right, so you can watch that and just go, oh wow, that was a weird graphic violence for no reason or whatever. But there is a reason, and you have to like, you kind of have to research it. It's not readily apparent when you just watch the movie. You need to know the alternate title of the film. It was also called Viet 68 or Viet 67 or whatever. And the whole thing is a commentary on the U.S. involvement in the Vietnam War. Just know that going into it, give it a watch. And if you like the kind of like art house type stuff, you might get some you might get something worthwhile out of The Big Shave. It's definitely minor. I mean, it's a short film. I'll put it in C tier, to be fair. I enjoy it a whole lot. Next up is Goodfellas. Now, not gonna putz around here. Yes, The Godfather is excellent. Yes, The Godfather Part 2 is even better. But Goodfellas is the best gangster film ever made. I know it's very split. People go Godfather or Goodfellas. I go Goodfellas 100% of the time. Easily. Goodfellas, S tier, best gangster film ever made. Next up we have Vinyl, which is another TV project, another HBO TV series. Again, Scorsese was an executive producer and he directed the pilot. It was another show he kind of kicked off. He launched it. Now, unlike with Boardwalk Empire, where I've seen the entire show twice, I've actually only seen the pilot of Vinyl. I've only seen that one episode. I would be interested to see the rest, but that pilot didn't grip me enough to immediately go through the rest of it. And I watched the pilot a couple years ago, and I haven't felt particularly compelled to return to it. So because of that, I'm going to put it in the C tier. It was definitely good, though. It was enjoyable. I like Bobby Cannavale. I like seeing Ray Romano in a dramatic role, because I think he's kind of morphed into a really good actor these last couple of years with stuff like Paddleton and The Big Sick. So I'll return to Vinyl at some point. Also, it getting canceled so early is probably another reason why I haven't gone to it, because I know it ended prematurely. So that's kind of do I want to get so invested in a show that doesn't have a real ending? Next up is The Last Temptation of Christ. Now, there's a couple Scorsese movies on this list that I watched specifically to sort of round out my experiences with the big Scorsese movies for the purposes of doing this tier list. The Last Temptation of Christ was the last one I had left to watch. I think it took me so long to watch because I'm not religious whatsoever, and I've never been into Jesus-y movies and stuff like that. But if you're in the same boat as me, do not worry. This isn't really it is a religious film, but it goes about it in a unique way. There are a bunch of Christians who fucking hate this movie. Scorsese was getting death threats like crazy. People hated him when he made this movie. He got in so much trouble, and which is just ridiculous. Fuck all those people. It's a good movie. It has something to say. I mean, it's adapted from a novel, and Paul Schrader wrote the screenplay. This is another collaboration between the two of them. Paul Schrader adapted the novel for Scorsese to make. This film, he's called one of his most personal, even though it's a story about the life and death of Jesus Christ. It's a film that took many years to make. This was a long time in the works. Willem Dafoe as Christ is kind of divisive. I think he's amazing in the role. It's just a great Willem Dafoe performance. I am a huge fan of the guy, so maybe I'm a little biased there. But also Harvey Keitel is so great as Judas. I have to say, it is very distracting that all of these people in this story set in the Middle East, they all have New York accents. They have Brooklyn accents. It's definitely a little distracting. But it's a gorgeous film. It's gripping. The way that it diverges from the actual biblical stories is fascinating. And it's got such a good, I was going to say ending, but really the entire third act. There's a point where it diverges from the stories of the Bible. And I found it fascinating. I had no idea it was coming up. For all I knew, it was just a faithful telling of the life and death of Christ or whatever. I didn't know. I had no idea that it was going to diverge in this fascinating way. So, very good film. As someone who is completely not religious whatsoever, I think Last Temptation of Christ is an A-tier film. Good movie. Next up is The King of Comedy. This is another great Robert De Niro, Martin Scorsese collaboration. Jerry Lewis is really good at it too. This one wasn't as big of a hit when it came out. I think audiences were in Taxi Driver mode. They wanted that level of intensity or whatever. King of Comedy, or maybe they wanted more of a comedy because it's called King of Comedy. I don't know. There is some humor in it, but it's a very dark film. The main character, Rupert Pupkin, is just a fascinating guy. It's a deeply engrossing character study of a unique individual, and Robert De Niro gives one of his best performances in this film. You could make a case that this is his best performance, Rupert Pupkin. It's tough between Rupert Pupkin and Travis Bickle. Those two characters are just so iconic. King of Comedy, I think, is sometimes underrated, but other circles do kind of hail it as the classic that it rightly is. I almost want to put it in S tier, but I'm trying to be a little more strict on S tier, because I feel if I give out too many S tiers, it starts to lose its meaning a little bit, Yeah, fuck it, S tier. Fuck it. I'm going for it. If you haven't seen King of Comedy, watch it. If you haven't seen The King of Comedy, but you've seen Joker, when you watch King of Comedy, you will know why people are calling Joker a pretty shameless ripoff. It's a knowing homage, because they cast De Niro in Joker and all that. But I don't know. There's a difference between pulling influence from something, and Joker just takes too much. It takes so much from Taxi Driver and King of Comedy. It's basically just those two movies and those two De Niro performances getting really watered down in Joker. It's just a big part of why Joker didn't work so well for me is because I know that Taxi Driver and King of Comedy did everything Joker did much better. Okay, After Hours. After Hours is a straight up comedy. It's shot very interestingly. It's probably Scorsese at his most 80s. Like, a lot of his movies feel very timeless, but After Hours feels distinctly 80s. The script is bizarre. A lot of the stuff is effectively funny. There's a great cast of supporting characters. You got Cheech and Chong in there who are fun. You got a whole great, like, rogues gallery almost of supporting characters that move in and out through the script. I really like the lead performance. It's the friend guy who gets eaten by a werewolf in An American Werewolf in London. I like that actor, man. Other than those two movies, I haven't seen him in like anything. The script is bizarre. It almost has like a Charlie Kaufman kind of edge to it. It kind of, but like not quite as smart. It's not as good as a Charlie Kaufman script, but it's strange in the same ways that a Charlie Kaufman script is, without these sort of subtextural, profound resonance that a Charlie Kaufman film has. It's like a rough draft of a script that Charlie Kaufman might have written and then never got around to finishing. After Hours is good, enjoyable, not great. I think it falls into the B tier. Next up is Bringing Out the Dead. Bringing Out the Dead is actually another Paul Schrader collaboration. This one isn't talked about quite as much as some of the other ones. This one really flew under the radar, I think. I've never heard anyone talk about Bringing Out the Dead. I don't exactly know why. I think it's really good. I think it's another great script from Schrader. This one's, again, adapted from a novel. The only thing I don't like on the script level, there's two things that don't really work for me on a script level. One of them is there's so many disparate plot threads, and a lot of them don't really connect. And the other thing is a bunch of Nick Cage is the star, and he has a lot of narration. A lot of his narration is woefully overwrought, I would say. I think it was just pulled straight from like the prose of the novel. That's my guess anyway. I don't know. I've never read the book, but that's nowhere near enough to ruin the movie. Like, it's such a good cast of characters. Like Nick Cage, he's really good in this one. Like, his performances are very hit or miss. He's great in this one. You really believe how like weary this man is, how tired he is, how unhinged he is. It's a great performance. But the entire supporting cast is just so much fun. You have a great Ving Rhames performance. You have a great Patricia Arquette performance. You got a great Tom Sizemore performance. You got a great John Goodman performance. You even have a really interesting Mark Anthony performance. Beyond just good performances, though, the characters are all like fascinating. Everyone is so unique. Like, every voice we hear from in this movie is so unique and specific. And it's really interesting. The movie has a lot of interesting things to say. It makes me wonder why there haven't been more like paramedic movies, because it seems like fertile ground for dramatic storytelling. There's a handful of truly profound moments in this movie as well. It's really great. Those couple of script things are really my only problems with it. It's like halfway between A and B tier. I'm going to put it in B for now. It feels a lot like Taxi Driver, actually. It's kind of like Schrader and Scorsese swapped out the taxi for an ambulance, for another New York by Night ride-along. Okay, next up is The Color of Money. This is Scorsese's long-awaited... I don't know if it was really awaited. This is Scorsese's long-after follow-up to The Hustler. Paul Newman is back playing Fast Eddie Felson, one of his most iconic roles. It's a very good film. I love how it's shot. Scorsese shoots a pool table in every conceivable way that you could possibly shoot a pool table. If you're a filmmaker and you need to shoot like a pool table scene, just look at The Color of Money in any way you could possibly film it. Scorsese did in The Color of Money. Newman's performance is again great. He slips back into that Fast Eddie Felson role like a glove. Fits like a glove. Tom Cruise is good. Doesn't quite match up to Paul Newman's role. The only real issue with Color of Money is that it is just kind of like stuck in the shadow of The Hustler. It's not as good as The Hustler. B or C? I think it's B though. I mean, it's enjoyable. It's very well made. So like Bringing Out the Dead is closer to A than C. Color of Money is closer to C than A. But I think they're both in the B territory. Next up is Cape Fear. It's another great Robert De Niro performance. Cape Fear, this one's a remake, and I've heard it get some shit sometimes. It's a very good thriller with a great performance, a great villain, Max Cady. I think it's B tier. Yeah, I think it's B tier. Next up is Casino, which in many ways was sort of a re-team from Goodfellas. Most notably, you got De Niro and you got Pesci back. Now, I've heard some people say that Casino is just Goodfellas light, or that like they're doing the same thing. It's like a retread. I gotta push back on that. Like, yes, Pesci gives another amazing fucking performance, and he is at a similar like violent, unpredictable energy, but the character is very different at the same time. Like, To say it's a retread is not giving him enough credit. Pesci is fucking crushing it in this movie, and so is De Niro. De Niro, especially, his character is completely different. I don't understand the people who say he's just the same character as Goodfellas and Casino. It's completely different. Ace Rothstein is like nowhere near the same character as his Goodfellas character. And you can't talk about Casino without talking about De Niro's suits. His many, many, many suits. I want every single one of those fucking pastel suits right this goddamn second. Truck them over to me. I love it about as much as Goodfellas. I'm putting it in the S tier. Oh, and next up we got The Irishman. If you guys haven't seen The Irishman yet, if you're intimidated by its 4-hour runtime or whatever, which is, I guess that's understandable, right? It breezes right by. The Irishman could have been another 4 hours long, and I would have enjoyed every second of it. It's another masterwork. It's another gangster masterpiece from Mr. Martin Scorsese. It's such like a blessing that he's still making movies this good, this profoundly immaculate. This is a new masterpiece from Martin Scorsese. The Irishman gets an S tier, and it should not be downplayed. People want to let time pass to like reevaluate movies or whatever. The Irishman is an instant classic. It is a phenomenal piece of work. Robert De Niro, Joe Pesci, Al Pacino, all give better performances than they have in years. Joe Pesci, just because he hasn't given any performances in years. Next up is Silence, another one of Scorsese's more recent movies. Ignore the fact that Liam Neeson is gigantic on all the posters for some reason. He's barely in the movie, and the real stars of the film are Andrew Garfield, he's the real protagonist, and then Adam Driver is like the secondary protagonist. Liam Neeson is not a fucking protagonist, he's not an antagonist, he's not even a huge part of it. He's a smallish part toward the end of the film. Silence is actually a great film. It's another religious kind of movie, another religious theological exploration kind of film. It's very subtle and understated, but it's powerful. Like, it sneaks up on you how powerful it is. It's another very long runtime, and it's a heavy movie. I greatly enjoyed it, and it's another one that I want to watch again. I've only seen this one once. I saw this at an early screening, interviewed it right when it came out. I enjoyed it a whole lot. I think it's an A-tier film. I didn't hear this one get talked about nearly as much as most of Scorsese's other movies. I'm not sure why it flew under the radar so much. It's very good. If you overlooked Silence, give it a watch. It's great. Next up is Gangs of New York. This one's a little tricky because it has some things I love and it has some other things I don't really like. Of course, Daniel Day-Lewis is excellent in it. I fucking love the whole battle arena crazy weapon fight at the beginning. I love all that stuff. Bill the Butcher, any scene he's in is great. Leonardo DiCaprio is not at his best when it comes to like Scorsese collaborations. Of all the times Scorsese and DiCaprio have worked together, this is my least favorite performance of his. He's still pretty good, but he's not like a fucking firework like he is in all the other Scorsese collaborations. And Cameron Diaz, I don't really like in this movie. I don't really like her character or her involvement in the plot. She doesn't really need to be there. This is the only one of Scorsese's like pretty long movies that feels long to me. Like, Gangs of New York feels a lot longer to me than The Irishman when I'm just watching it. Because it's got a lot of drag. It's got a lot of meandering and a lot of downtime. There's a lot of fat that could be trimmed from these bones. And I wouldn't say that about any of his other long movies. Yeah. So Gangs of New York, it's got some stuff I love. Like, mostly Daniel Day-Lewis. But overall, the film, it's C tier for me. Next up is The Aviator. Whereas Gangs of New York had one of the less impressive Leo Dio performances, I think The Aviator has one of his absolute best performances, not just with Scorsese, but in general. I mean, his best performances are with Scorsese and with Tarantino. The Aviator is one of his absolute best. I think he could have won the Oscar for this performance. His performance as Howard Hawks is so good. His like decline into insanity is so effective because it feels so real. And it's so like, it catches you off guard when the sharp decline happens. Really good stuff. There's a little bit of CG work that has not aged too well. But other than that, it's great all around. Like, Cate Blanchett's really good in it. She's got a great supporting role. It's just a good story. I'd give it a B tier. Next up is Raging Bull. One of Robert De Niro's best performances, one of Paul Schrader's best screenplays, one of Thelma Schoonmaker's best editing jobs, which I can't believe I haven't even mentioned her yet. Thelma Schoonmaker is a big part of why so many of these movies are as great as they are. In the running for best editor of all time. I mean, she's one of the very few editors who people like know her name because her work is so iconic and so important to cinema as a whole. Also a great Joe Pesci performance. And Raging Bull is truly one of Scorsese's best films. S tier. It's another S tier film. We got a lot of S tier films. I don't know why his filmography makes like a perfect staircase graph, but hey, it's very top heavy. And last up we have Rolling Thunder Revue. This one is a documentary, but it's really only like a pseudo documentary because if you weren't aware, this is basically a documentary on a time in Bob Dylan's life, but there's a bunch of bullshit in there, like a bunch of intentionally fake stuff. It's basically playing around with Bob Dylan's persona and this idea of like fame and persona and like legend, like the legendary status that Bob Dylan has. There are some people in this movie giving interviews who are not people just giving interviews as themselves. They are like characters. There's a character from Tanner 88 in there. There's other people who are just like giving scripted interviews. There are made up stories in here, all culminating in like the legend that is Bob Dylan, including from Bob Dylan himself talking about stuff and you don't know like what to trust or whatever. Great concert footage, great stories, and it's kind of unique as far as documentaries go. I'm a big Bob Dylan fan, so of course I checked this out. I would call it essential viewing for Bob Dylan fans. Maybe not essential viewing for Martin Scorsese fans. In the whole canon of things, I'd say it's a B tier kind of work. So there we go. That is our tier list with our 24 Martin Scorsese movies. He has 7 S tier films and 7 B tier films. He might be the only filmmaker that I would give 7 S tier films, like more S tier films than any other tier. I mean, tied with B tier, I guess. But plenty of A tier films too, 6 A tier films. You could also, I'm contemplating Bringing Out the Dead up to A tier. Great filmmaker. I love Scorsese, man. He's such just a positive influence in the world of cinema as well. You can tell how much he loves movies and like film preservation, film history. That's my tier list. That is my ranking of the Martin Scorsese filmography. He's got a couple films that I still haven't seen yet, but I got most of them in here. There's like The Last Waltz, that's another music documentary. There's New York, New York, Age of Innocence, Kundun. So there's a few things I still got to check out, but this is the bulk of his main filmography. Check out my other tier lists and make sure you subscribe right here at Brickwall Pictures for more of my stuff. More tier lists, more regular reviews, video essays, all kinds of stuff. So subscribe, stick around. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.